What if you didn't miss the red flags? What if you felt them and you just weren't taught how to read them? Maybe something always felt slightly off, even when you couldn't explain why. Or conversations would leave you feeling unsettled for days. Or you couldn't fully relax around them or be yourself or say what you actually felt. Your body was reading the relationship correctly. You just didn't have the language for it yet. Today, I'm going to show you the 3 reasons you were taught to override what your body already knew, so you can trust yourself before it costs you again. And none of these reasons are about being naive or being weak or missing something obvious. They're about what you were never taught. And by the end of this, you're going to realize something that changes everything. You didn't do anything wrong. You just played fair in a game where they were changing the rules. Number 1, you were taught to trust their words the way you'd mean them. Here's something you've probably been told, that you gave too much benefit of the doubt, that you were too trusting. But that framing gets it completely wrong. Think about what it actually means when you say something. When you say, "I'm sorry," you mean it. You go home, you lie awake, you think about what happened, you actually try to change. When you say "I love you," it's your whole heart saying that. When you say "I want to work on this," you show up and you do the work. So of course you assume that they meant the same things. Why wouldn't you? You can only see the world through the lens of who you are. That is not naivety, that is integrity. Nobody pulled you aside and said, "Hey, some people don't operate with basic relational good faith." So much of what we were taught says the same thing. Love well, try harder, communicate clearly, be patient, and it will work. But nobody told you that some people are not asking, "How do we both feel good here?" They're asking, "What do I get out of this?" That kind of class doesn't exist. So you walked in with a full heart and unfortunately a blind spot, and that is not your fault. You weren't foolish, you just were never given the map. Here's what that looked like in real life. They said, "I'll do better," and you believe them. Because when you say that, you mean it. You lie awake, you reflect, you actually follow through. So you gave them time, you were patient, you extended every benefit of the doubt. Because in your world, "I'll do better" is a promise you would keep. You were extending the same trust you would have wanted someone to extend to you. That's not a flaw. That is who you are. Now, if you're watching this and thinking, "Okay, but what does this mean for my specific situation?" I made a free quiz that's going to show you your exact relational pattern. It only takes 2 minutes and I'll link it below. And stay with me because what I'm about to say is the part that finally explains why you kept second guessing yourself. Number 2, you were taught to call your body's signals by the wrong name. There was something that was happening the whole time. Not just in your mind, but in your body, and you felt it. There was always a low level of unease that never quite settled, or you couldn't fully be yourself around them. You'd catch yourself choosing words carefully before you said them, already aware of how they might react, already adjusting. And you didn't call that an intelligent signal. You were taught by society to call it anxiety, to call it overthinking, to call it being obsessive, to call it your past trauma or childhood wounds. So of course you thought, maybe I'm too sensitive. Maybe I'm the problem. Let's look at that deeper and how did it actually feel from the inside? Because from the inside, it probably felt more like, "Hey, I wanted us to feel good. I wanted them to have a good experience being around me. I cared about how they felt. I was trying to bring the energy back to something warm, something connected, something where we could actually reach each other." That's someone who genuinely cared about the other person's experience. Someone who wanted the relationship to feel good for both of them. The difference is that you were tuned in enough to feel the disconnection sooner and relational enough to want to do something about it. But while you were focused on moving back towards connection, your body was picking up on something else. It was registering a mismatch between what it felt like to be around someone who was actually safe and what this relationship actually felt like. Think about how you prepared for a hard conversation with them. You'd go over it in your head beforehand, running through what you were going to say, thinking about how to word it, already anticipating what might happen, already bracing. Nobody told you that mentally rehearsing a conversation with someone is important information. You were conditioned to call it anxiety or name it your stuff or tell yourself that you were overthinking. But your body was right. It was reading the relationship accurately. You just hadn't been given the language or framework to recognize it as an intelligent signal yet. And this is where it gets really important. Number 3, you were taught that if you were good enough, they would be too. You've probably spent a lot of time asking yourself what you did wrong, but I want you to hear what I'm about to say. How you showed up in that relationship, assuming good faith, communicating openly, wanting repair, caring about how your words landed on them, or trying harder when things got hard, that was correct. Those are the behaviors of someone who understands what a real relationship actually requires: honesty, repair, mutual care, accountability. Those aren't extras. Those are the foundation. And you are bringing those necessary relational qualities to the table. The fact that it didn't work is not proof that you failed. It's proof that only one person was actually doing the relationship. Think about it this way. Imagine 2 people playing a game. One person is following all the rules, showing up, communicating, taking responsibility, trying to repair after every rupture. The other person is quietly changing the rules every time things get hard. They're moving the goalposts, making sure that they never lose. The person following the rules doesn't keep losing because they're bad at the game. They keep losing because the game was never fair. That was your relationship. You were playing fair with everything you had, fully, genuinely, with your whole heart. That is not someone who did it wrong. That is someone who deserves a person that shows up the same way. However, the relationship used your greatest strengths against you: your loyalty, your patience, your hope, your belief that people can change and grow. But those strengths are not the problem. They were just given to someone who could not meet them. And this is why the question is never, why didn't you see the red flags sooner? You actually did. You felt the way something always seemed slightly off. You felt the way conversations would leave you unsettled for days. You felt the way you couldn't fully exhale, no matter how hard you tried. So the real question is, what were those signals actually pointing to? Because once you stop blaming yourself for missing the signs, you can finally start to see the pattern clearly. Not the obvious stuff that everyone names after the fact, but the subtle signs most people miss while they're still in it. So in the next video, I'm going to show you 3 of those subtle signs, including the one that keeps you questioning yourself long after the relationship is over. I'll link it right here. Because once you understand these 3 signs, you won't need another red flag checklist to tell you what your body already knew.